So just yesterday, we were talking about how Rudy Giuliani should be maybe a little bit more careful about the way he's been talking about Donald Trump in some of his recent media appearances, seeming to threaten the president that if he were to go down in some fashion, he has an insurance policy. Well, that is still potentially a threat to Rudy Giuliani, but not necessarily the most pressing one, because as of today, we found out more of some of the investigation that's going on into Giuliani's business dealings with Parnas and Fruman, the two associates that have gotten wrapped up into this Ukraine scandal. So to give you an idea, this is details coming out of a grand jury subpoena. Now, importantly for Giuliani, he is not being identified as the principal target here. It's his business dealings with Parnas and Fruman. They're the ones being investigated as of right now. But the idea is that hypothetically, if there is something connecting the two, it is unlikely to be just a crime for those two and not for Rudy Giuliani. So what is the sort of the bounds of what's being investigated right now? It's a long list. So conspiracy to defraud the United States, obstruction of justice, making false statements to federal officials, wire fraud, money laundering. The list goes on from there. Violations of federal election laws that prohibit the use of straw donors and foreign money in U.S. elections. Now, there's a few there that are more likely to really be constrained to Parnas and Fruman and not to Giuliani. The actual use of the straw donors, I haven't heard anything credible that indicates that Rudy Giuliani was necessarily involved in that. That seems like it was a Parnas and Fruman thing that they were using to gain more access to Donald Trump and not necessarily directly to Rudy Giuliani. But some of it, in terms of the money laundering, the wire fraud, and all of that, I mean, we know he was being paid quite a bit of money from a couple of these different companies owned by those two, including Fraud Guarantee. Significant chunks of money. Perhaps Rudy Giuliani is the sort of guy that did that all above board, totally legal. That remains to be seen, and we will find out. Now, this is a big deal potentially because, I mean, we're always saying follow the money. It'll turn up other crimes and things like that. I mean, Parnas and Fruman, the idea that neither of them were really up to anything wrong and they're going to come through this whole thing totally clean, that seems really hard to imagine at this point. Rudy Giuliani perhaps is more separate than it seems, but it sure seems over the past month or so, he was very close with this guy's longstanding relationship with him, seemed to be the main point of contact with Donald Trump, and they at least, if not him, they at least were willing to break the law to get closer contact with Donald Trump. And not just Donald Trump, by the way. There were other senior Republicans that they were trying to gain influence over as well, you might recall. So anyway, we will see as the grand jury subpoena goes forward, as they do those investigations. I have no idea at this point what the timeline for that actually is. It seems complex to look through, several years of business dealings with multiple individuals and multiple corporations. It's possible to take some time. It might be outside of even the timeline that this impeachment inquiry is going to be going on, because supposedly the Democrats said that they wanted to have that thing wrapped up not long after Thanksgiving. It's possible that some of the testimony we saw last week might extend that timeline, but as of right now, that's what they had been saying. By the way, I am seeing all the happy birthdays. It's actually not my birthday. It's my mom's birthday, but I will thank you on her behalf. Mama Iadarola's birthday is going on right now. And thank you for those of you who were talking about the wedding. I am very much looking forward to it happening this Saturday. So anyway, Curious, I see your comment about Nunes and the ethics investigation. So we actually did a video about Nunes yesterday on the damage report. So you can that's up on the YouTube channel. You can go look at that. There's a few other things that I do want to briefly mention, stuff that would not unfortunately fit on the live show today, which I will give you a preview for in just a little bit. But before I get to these, if you haven't already clicked the like button, please do that. Someone yesterday in the live chat was telling me that helps other people know that this is actually happening. I don't really understand much about the algorithm or how it's pushed out, but if you could remember to hit the like button, I would definitely appreciate that. So thank you. And it looks like some of you are already doing that. So thank you very much. Okay, the next thing, this is not a huge news story or anything. I'm really talking about it because it's not a big news story, but I think that it is important. So in terms of the Democratic primary nomination, the rank of the different candidates and how they've been polling, there have really only been a few significant stories so far this year. So early on, you had some uncertainty about whether or not Biden would get into the race. But even before then, he was already on the polls, and he was generally polling about as well as he got to be once he's actually in. Then you had a couple of little shakeups. You had Kamala Harris months ago getting a brief rise and fall. There was a bit of that early on for Beto O'Rourke and Buttigieg too. We're talking about a couple of points or whatever, but it did exist. And then basically you had a few months where things were pretty set. Shaz, thank you very much. Mine is in February, actually. And then basically the only big change, and I would say the single biggest shift we had, was the rise of Elizabeth Warren back months ago. So she jumped up really about, I mean, we're talking like 12 points on average in the RCP average. Thank you, Abby the Spoon Lady. I appreciate that. And she went up significantly. And at one point, very briefly, we're talking about less than a full week, she eclipsed Biden in the average across many polls. Now, what's interesting is that got a lot of coverage. I mean, we even talked about it. It was significant. But what hasn't gotten a lot of coverage was the absolute reversal of that trend over the course of the past 2 months or so. So you had that brief period where Warren eclipsed Biden. Then that started to trend down. And that has been fairly consistent over the past couple of months until the point where now, as of about a week ago, and this has been consistent for that week, Bernie is now back up to, I'm seeing on the RCP average as of today, a 1.5 point lead over Warren. And that means that at this point, Biden is now up 9.8 points on average over Bernie. So less than 10, but that's still significant. That's not nothing. Outside of that, so I'm basically looking at a printout of the RCP average. It's going to be really hard for you to follow, so I'm not really going to try to have you follow the actual visual. It's been fairly consistent over that. I mean, you have Buttigieg effectively replacing Kamala Harris, but that isn't even that new of a story, really. It's been sort of trending up a little bit. And even now, he's at an average of, it's looking like 8 points with Harris down to 4. She had previously been as high as 7 or 8 points or something like that. And so really what's interesting is that the only big story here that hasn't really been covered is this new rise of Bernie back to second place. We'll have to see if it extends weeks and months into the future. But it's now, I mean, I'm looking back, and to see the same sort of movement that we've seen, you have to go back at least 3 months now. Outside of that, it's been a mess down at the bottom. I mean, below Harris at 4, you have Yang at 3, and then Gabbard and Bloomberg at 2, and everybody else is even below 2. And at some point, it is going to be interesting to see how many months can you poll at 0 or 1 or 2 points after how many debates have we had now? Like, is it like 5 debates? At least 4 or 5 debates. If your numbers aren't moving from 1 or 2 points after that, I don't know what you're expecting is going to happen in Iowa and New Hampshire. I get that, like, there's very little cost to these people of continuing their run. I mean, they're being literally handed money to do it, and a lot of them are getting more exposure than they could get from literally anything else. But I'm looking at some of these numbers, like Bullock and Delaney and Bennett are still in this. If you combine all of them, you get 2.3 points, and it hasn't moved. It hasn't moved in literally months. What are they still doing in this thing? But anyway, so that is there. I will also say, over the past 3 weeks or so, Biden's average has gone up by about 5 points. And so, again, it seems inevitable that he will go down. But as of right now, he's at his historic highest point. Biden is right now, trending down about a point from a week ago. But he's about as strong as he's been in this entire race. And I think that the idea that he would inevitably slide, something that I have believed, it isn't necessarily playing out just yet. So bear that in mind. He's not doing great in Iowa. He's not doing great in New Hampshire. The first couple of primaries and caucuses are going to be really rough for him, but he's polling much better in the 3 or 4 that happened right after that. And I think as of right now, at least in the early polling for Super Tuesday, which we don't have a lot of, he's looking pretty good there. And so if him like getting 3rd or 4th or whatever in Iowa and New Hampshire, if that doesn't significantly hurt him in the polls and nothing else big happens to shake up this race, he's set to have a couple of weeks where it looks really bad and then do pretty well in a couple of races in South Carolina and Nevada and possibly on Super Tuesday too. So all of this is stuff that we should very much be preparing for. Buttigieg is rising. I understand that. That's why we're doing a little bit more analysis of him. Back when he was at 2 points, there wasn't much point to it. But now he's a top 4 candidate. But he still has like 1/4 the support that Biden has. So bear that in mind. Okay, sorry. Let me check in with a couple of these comments. People in the top 10 still running just in case. Yeah, a lot of them are hypothetically looking to be people's VPs. I don't know that it's necessarily the ones that people are popularly talking about. But yeah, a lot of them are probably hoping to get a position in the administration or, VP or something like that. Darlene says, what do people see in Biden? So that's an interesting question. So I try to look at that from a perspective outside of my bubble. Like I've been in Ubers, for instance, in different cities where I try not to talk about politics when I can, but if they bring up politics, I'll ask, so who are you supporting? And I've had multiple people say Biden, and I've tried to very gently get to why. And look, I'm trying not to be biased. They're definitely not responding with, here are the top 10 policies that I like Biden best on. But it's usually a combination of feeling like he's got gravitas, or he's responsible or intelligent or experienced. It's usually these sort of personal characteristics as opposed to ideology or policy that people bring up to me. And it really, like, people are very familiar with Joe Biden. He's been a national figure for, arguably even into the 90s, and certainly for the past decade plus, people are very familiar with him. And that is still a very strong motivator in these primaries. Like, we might follow every nuance of this thing, but the vast majority of people aren't doing that. Let's talk about Zootopia memes. I'm going to need a few because I don't actually know them. Anyway, okay, so I did just want to briefly mention, I'm not going to have time to get into one of these stories, but I just wanted to briefly mention, oh wait, somebody asked about Klobuchar. Klobuchar's at 1.5 points. I mean, she's still running. And Bill Maher's still like, she can do this thing. No. Klobuchar is arguably doing worse in the individual state polls. Maybe she's hoping to be Biden's VP. I don't know. And maybe they're hoping something crazy is going to change, but it's not like nobody knows who Klobuchar is and they're just waiting for this one breakthrough viral moment or something like that. It's just not likely to happen. Most of these people are either cynically pretending to run for president for some other political goal, whether inside of the presidential race or otherwise, or they are deluding themselves, realistically. I know we're not supposed to say that. We're supposed to say that, anyone can do it. Like, this thing can get shaken up, and that's true. But a lot of people, I think, are deluding themselves. Really fast, you should definitely take a look. Common Dreams has an article right now about AOC doing a public address and talking about this idea that progressives are just trying to get into office by promising free stuff to people, and she has a great argument as to why she thinks that's a BS argument. And in particular, the reason I bring this up is she doesn't mention who, but you might recall last week I was talking about Buttigieg's thing where he doesn't support paying public college because he doesn't want to pay for millionaires' kids to go to college. She doesn't say who she's talking about, but she is definitely talking about Buttigieg there. And she said, I'm already hearing some of these neoliberal folks who are trying to flip the script on us and say, oh, I don't want to pay for millionaires' kids to go to college. That argument makes no more sense than saying publicly funded infrastructure unfairly benefits the rich. I believe all people should be able to go to a public library. Everyone can drive on our roads. Everyone should be able to send our kids to public school. And every person who needs it should have access to public housing that looks like this. That's totally true. Imagine if Biden was like, I'm going to pull funding to public libraries because I don't want Eric Trump being able to check out books for free. He has enough money. He can get his own books on Amazon or whatever. That would be ridiculous. That wouldn't make any sense. Now, I understand that the amounts are a little bit more, but the idea that simply because people who can pay for it themselves could have access to something, like AOC is 100% right. You could apply that to literally hundreds, if not thousands of public goods. So they try to say free stuff, but hearing that out of the mouth of someone who wants to be the Democratic nominee for president, when we've gotten so used to Fox News spreading those arguments. I mean, that's what it was throughout the Obama years, was free stuff, Obama phones, all of that. Any public good, anything that is not expressly designed to solely benefit the rich is free stuff that's given out. And we need to fight back against this. And I think the AOC has a great argument there. So anyway, definitely take a look at that. There's more that I want to get to, but unfortunately there's not time because we're down to just 20 minutes before the live show. Thank you, Sean, for the happy birthday. Anyway, so what can you expect today on the live show? We have 3 guests who are going to be joining us. Jordan Ewell is going to be breaking down some of the big news of the day, including Rick Perry. So he just had that thing where he was saying that Trump is the chosen one. Well, I went back to 2015 and I found a Rick Perry speech about Trump that I think might be harsher against Trump than anything I've said on the damage report. So that's going to be a lot of fun. We've also got Obama and his apparent plan to speak out against Bernie if Bernie takes first place at some point. So we're going to be talking about that. And a Republican senator on live TV admits he was wrong. You never see that anymore, but we're going to show it to you today. Let's see. We've also got, oh, we got a really sad story. I hate to do a downer story, but we were going to do Meanwhile In, and one of the stories was going to be about the situation with koalas right now, thanks to the brush fires in Australia. And I decided, no, that has to be the whole thing. So we're going to be talking about the koalas, and it's just about the saddest story. We're going to play this video, and it is heartbreaking. But anyway, we got that too. And lots more. Oh, Jose Caballero is a candidate for Congress in California. He's going to be joining us to talk about student loan debt cancellation, which has been, thankfully, there's been a couple of op-eds this week that have raised it into the public consciousness again. So we're going to be talking about that. And then also Donald Trump's war on the military. So he's a vet, so he's going to bring his, obviously, much more personal experience with this sort of story to it. It's something we've been talking about throughout the last week, but Jose is going to be joining us to talk about it too. Anyway, thank you so much, everybody, for joining me. And for those of you who are participating in the like spike, I really appreciated that. Looks like it's still going up, so thank you. Maybe that does actually spread to more people. We'll have to see. I like having as many of you as possible so that we get, like, you know, a raucous chat going. Maybe that's the way to do it. Maybe you guys might know a lot more about that than me. But anyway, I got to run. If you're not already a member, you're going to want to become one. Go to tyt.com/John so that you can watch the live show, which is less than 20 minutes away. You can get it on the app. TYT app is absolutely awesome. It's got everything, basically. You can also watch it on the website if you're at your computer or something like that. But anyway, I got to run. So I'll see you soon. I see that, Gabby. I see that.